Good evening, everyone. My name is Dustin. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Dustin.
It's my first open talk. I guess I'll thank James for asking me.
We just have to record it. No
it's
pressure.
fine.
No pressure.
It's just the pressure's on, I suppose. I talked to James not too long ago because my sponsee said that he just got off the phone with him. I called James, so you stick around long enough, you get asked to do open talks in AA. I also found that, no one wants to find out or admit that they're an alcoholic and that they have to come to meetings. But then if you stick around long enough, you find out that it's one of the best things that can happen to you. Is that you find out you're an alcoholic and that you get to go to meetings. That took me a long time to come to this realization. A lot of people have asked me over like the past week since James had asked me if I'm nervous. And not necessarily. It's my story, right? And it seems to freak some people out. But now, standing like right here, I realize that like I am absolutely nervous for whatever reason. And my girlfriend was asking me, "Have you like prepared for this at all?" She's like, "I would do a PowerPoint." I don't have that. No, we don't do that here. I didn't prepare anything, and I have a friend in the program. Her name's Carrie. She's like a giant over on the east side, and she started her open talk one time. She's just like, I never prepare anything. She's been doing it some time, right? She always gets asked for them. And she's like, I just pray, God, like, let me be of service and then just let everything come out. Like, I wrote this story, so it seems to be that like, should just be the format I go off of. I know this, so let's just spit it out. So I think, what's the format again? What's it like? No, I'm just kidding. What happened? What's it like now?
What'd you have to change?
Yeah, everything, I suppose, huh?
MLA format.
Okay, I got you. Going back to college days. Like I said, I am an alcoholic, and it's the best thing that I've been able to admit to myself, and it took some time to get here. So when I was young, life was actually pretty good, like decent upbringing, really good parents. But for the most part, a lot of you can relate, and I always hear this at Open Talk, I just felt different. And I never felt like I belonged. And unfortunately, I went through some things in my life that just dove myself more inside of myself, if that makes sense. I've been a person who has never been able to successfully get myself off myself. And I think that's a problem that a lot of us alcoholics deal with. It's like, I can't get me off of me. And when you have a couple things, and I don't mean to be cryptic, but I don't really want to go into a lifelong story about the childhood events that I went through. But a couple of them are important. And one of them, I think, is my mother passing like when I was younger, or finding out that she had cancer at like a young age. But as far as like the obsession goes and like how that was brought on, some say you cross a line, and then others say that, we react differently to the substance. And I'm going to have to say it's a little bit of both for me. I remember for the first time that I was able to free myself of reality, and I smoked a little bit of pot for the first time. I think I was 14 years old. And during that time, and like I said before, I don't mean to be cryptic. I just don't want to go into like the lifelong childhood tragedies that I went through and like the things that like brought on some things. But it's not that I'm afraid to talk about it. I just think that like we all end up in this place, not from saintly behavior, and sometimes it's caused by shame, which is something that I don't really hear talked about too much here in the meetings. And I feel free to openly speak about it because it's my story. And I dealt with so much toxic shame as a young kid. That for the first time when I was able to escape reality, right, it was like my mind telling me that, like, wow, you can breathe for the first time. It was the first time that I ever experienced getting myself off myself. And I used that for a long time because of the pain that I was going through. Like, I could not look at myself in the mirror whatsoever for years as a young teenager. I didn't like myself. And that coupled with the fact that, like, my mom was sick and then just dealing with that for quite some time, opened up the avenue for me to just dive back into myself even more. And this created the onslaught of self-pity behavior and why me? Why does this have to happen to our family? Why is life so bad? And there goes a pattern of negative thinking. And the only thing that I found to get rid of that negative thinking was to relieve myself of that. And the only solution that I knew was given to me at a young age of 14 or 15, to which when I first smoked pot. And unfortunately, that progressed because one after another, I realized I needed something a little bit more to take the edge off. And I grew up in a neighborhood where, I don't know, maybe like 15 of us, like we're all musicians, and we all hung out at the same place, and we partied, right? And it really wasn't the scene that you probably would want your child to be growing up in. Unfortunately, there was a lot of us to which we were greatly affected by kind of like the opiate epidemic that kind of hit South Macomb in the early, around like 2009. And it became like kind of like a way of life for everyone, and we didn't really know better. We just thought we were having fun. Unfortunately, like the habit grew worse, and the partying became more. And eventually, I watched myself separate from the rest of the group because what it was doing to me was not the same that it was doing to everyone else. And this is where I was talking about, I don't know if this was a point in my life where I crossed the line or if this just affected me differently. Because like when I take something into my body, it affects myself way different than I saw like my friends at a younger age. When I would take a downer, I'd get more up. When I took an upper, it would flatline me. So like I did not understand it. I did not understand how I just kept progressing and everyone else was like okay. And I didn't really pay too much attention to that till now. This is bird's eye view looking back. I think that this is what you do. We're young. We're going to have some fun. Unfortunately, I had literally no idea what I was up against. I had no idea. Come 23, I was, my life had become fully unmanageable. Like I said, I was a lot of friends, musicians. I was in the music scene for quite some time. And I went to Chicago, and this is, I think, when it started to hit me. It was my 23rd birthday. I took a train down to Chicago, and I just got done playing a show. And for the first time, I had realized that I developed a physical dependence on something because I had left town for the first time. And for the first time in a long time, I had gone without something. And for the first time, I felt that I thought I was just sick. If no one would have told me, I probably could have convinced myself that I was just sick. But I remember I came back home, and I wasn't thinking about how I was feeling. And like my first thought wasn't like, I'm going to fix this by doing something. I just happened to do something, and then I realized that pain that I was feeling had gone away. And I realized at that point that I'd become physically dependent on something. Unfortunately, I didn't know anything about disease, and at that time, it really wasn't something you want to admit to your father that like, hey, like I have a physical dependence on something. So I just kept it under wraps long enough for the problem just to get worse, unfortunately. So come 24, I'd been to rehab like 2 or 3 times in that time, just not telling anyone. I would just go. I'd make up a lie to work. I wouldn't let them know where I was going. I'd like, hey, I have a family emergency. I have to leave for 21 days. Yeah. And I think I did that a few times. I was so ashamed of the fact that like I couldn't do this on my own, that I could never really tell anyone what was going on. After my mom passed at 21, my dad left to Florida like right after, and that's when things really got bad for me. So I didn't really have my father wasn't around. It's not his fault, and I don't blame him for not being around. Like he wanted to move to Florida after my mom passed, and I totally get that. Like he needed to kind of spread his wings a little bit because it was a difficult time. It was 7 years. My mom had cancer, so I didn't blame him when he was like, "I'm going to Florida." I'm like, sick. Like I'm moving in with my friend. Like I thought it was going to be fun. You know what I mean? And I didn't realize how much I really needed him like during those times. And as things got worse, I'd call him and tell him about it, and he just didn't understand. And for the longest time, I tried like getting trying to get someone to understand like what you're going through is impossible, right? Now it's much easier. It's better to understand than to be understood, and that took a long time to realize too. I tried to convince my dad, or I'm just trying to you don't understand what it's like, and he's old school, so it's just like willpower, son, and over and over and over again. It's just like you just gotta just tough it out, and I'm like, okay, sure, and I remember, I'd call that man so many times crying like I can't stop. And he would be like, you just need to get away. And I'm like, well, perfect. Let me just get away. And get away from it, right? Not necessarily geographical change. And I remember the first time I tried to do it on my own. And I think I was like, I don't know. This is around 23, 24 again, 25, somewhere around there. I think I made it like 10 days. And you don't realize you're an alcoholic until you try to get sober. And it's not like what brings us here that I realize that's like made me an alcoholic. It's like what we go through after like the drink is gone. I think a lot of you might be able to relate, but like every time that I tried to get sober, like those first couple of months felt like I was doing time. And I had nothing to like relieve that over and over and over again. And I also didn't have a program. I didn't know anything about AA. I'd go to rehabs and they talk about this stuff, but I only believed I had a problem with one thing. And when they told me you got to stop everything, that just wasn't really a philosophy that I was down to get behind. In fact, I thought a lot of the things that they were teaching us in there was excuse my language, a bunch of bullshit. And that was my closed-mindedness, right? And that's been my problem pretty much my whole entire life. So I think it'd been about maybe like 4 or 5 like attempts with treatment or with on my own before I come to a point, and I'd been introduced a little bit to meetings at that time, but I really wasn't too hip with it yet. And I had come to a point where I had been kicked out of my brother's house by that point. And I was sleeping on the couch at a place that I shouldn't be at. And I was hopeless. And I walked my ass to a meeting in 2016 of July 21st. To which I tell them at a meeting, like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just want to die. And I need help. And I'll never forget the Mark and Sarah. They're like, we're taking you to rehab right now. And I'm like, I've tried this. And they're like, you're going again. I was like, okay. And they literally scooped me up and they took me to a rehab that night, to which I spent 5 days in this place called Harbor Light in Mount Clemens. Absolutely atrocious place. But if you're willing to get sober, I suggest it to anyone. This is an old school, smelly and cold and miserable. And then like they didn't give you nothing to help you. Like they gave you Nutri-Grain bars and vitamins and water. And it was a 5-day program, and it was only $15. Yeah, I mean, hey, back then in 2015, like it was in 2016, it's quite difficult to get into treatment center. We're in a different time now, but back then, like you'd be put on a waiting list for like 30 days to like God knows how long. And I remember I'd call places all the time, and they're like, you got a minute. And I'm like, well, I'm just not going then. You know what I mean? You're going to expect me to hold out. I'm like, I don't even know if I have that long in me. And I did it a few times, but gosh. But yeah, I'm in that rehab, and I make it 5 days. I get out, and I ended up overdosing the day that I got out for the first time ever. And at that point, I'd been to rehab a few times before, and I met some people. And I met someone named Scott Hill. We both came into Sacred Heart, this rehab out in Memphis, one time together at the same time. And we were in the lobby, in the intake at the same time. We spent the same amount of time. And I remember that time he had went to one sober living home, and I had went to another. And at that time, Scott Hill stayed. I did not stay at the one that I was at, and that was 2015. Right, in 2015, it's starting to pick up, and that's when I said 2016, I go to that meeting, and I'm trying to full circle it back, and they get me into rehab. I get out, getting back to where I was, I overdose, and then I call Scott Hill because I did not know what to do at this point. And Scott Hill was staying at a place called Kyle's house, to which James Adamo was there, who asked me to speak today. And for the first time in my entire life, I found exactly what I had been looking for. I remember I called Scott. I was just like, I'm not going to pass a drug test. I've been drinking. I just died. Rehab doesn't work. Can you get me into this house? And they're like, no. You can't. Like, the rule is like you have to go to a treatment center, give us the papers, you can come in. And something, told the house manager at the time to let me in, and they let me in. They didn't let me leave the house for like 5 days, and I had spent 14 days miserable and kicking everything that I've been doing to myself for some odd years. And Kyle's house is a big part of my story because I'm actually there again today. But I stayed at Kyle's house for that first time for, let's see, the first time. So Kyle's house is strict, so strict. I'm talking like 90 days, 90 meetings. That's not bad, right? For some it is. For me it was. 90 days, no talking to women. Like, they'll pull your phone out of your hand if they find out that you're dating or you're texting anyone. They're going to kick you out of the house, which happened to me after 60 days. Also, like, just extensive rules, curfews, all this stuff to keep you in check. It's probably one of the strictest three-quarter houses in sober living homes in Macomb, Wayne, and Oakland, out of all of them. The cool thing about it is it's so strict because they can be. It's a nonprofit. Like, the owners do very well. It's not about that. The owner, his name is Jeremiah. His younger brother was Kyle, who passed away from an overdose, right? And the owner is also in the program, but they started this house in hopes to provide a safe place for people to get sober, alcoholics and drug addicts and the like. So I made it to that house, and for the first time ever, I saw people, like, it was like a second step thing for me, right? I got to see people who were far worse than me progressing in their lives. And I'm talking stories that would blow mine out of the water, but my story is like real important, right? So I think that no one's like me, and like it can't get worse than like what I've been through. Then I walk into those doors for the first time, and I see people who are fighting ridiculous felonies, who have been using way longer than I have gone through way more tragic stuff, who've lost more, who've given more stuff away, and are happy. And I didn't understand that. And that place was a learning curve for me, because I'd never been a friend, and I never knew what a friend was. I never paid bills on time, and I never was accountable for anything. I wasn't responsible for anything. And I hated life. I hated most people. I didn't trust anyone. I didn't like myself. And I saw all these things that I couldn't do, and I saw it happening in the people that were at this house. I spent some time at that house. I did get bumped from the house for about 2 months. They didn't let me back in for 2 months. That's how strict they are. But they let me back in. I stayed sober that time. And I moved back in for another 6 months. And because of Kyle's house and because of the program at that time, my program, actually, I made it 18 months. That was a milestone for me. I've never experienced that in my life. Unfortunately, this is my life at 18 months sober back in 2017. Everything, like, I had the illusion that everything was going right, but how I felt on the inside was just absolutely chaotic. I had moved out of Kyle's house. I had a job for the first time that paid good money. I had 2 cars. That was a big deal. For some, it may not seem like that, but like that was a big deal. And none of that, I realized that none of that stuff mattered. At 18 months sober, I felt more miserable than I had felt before I even got into Kyle's house for the first time. I mean, I'm talking like absolute depression, all this stuff. And I confused social acceptability and just having shit like with recovery and with serenity. I thought all this stuff mattered. I thought how I looked mattered, how I looked in front of other people. And I remember when I had lost the 18 months, I wasn't even upset that I lost the 18 months. I was more upset of how I looked in front of other people. And I think that was a big signifier of like I had this all wrong. And I think I made, after that point, like, I moved back into Kyle's house again. I had my own place. I moved right back in after 3 days for another 3 months, to which I moved back out, and I think I roughly almost make it a year again. And this is 2019 now, and let me just say, I just got a year, August 23rd, not too long ago. Thank you. Appreciate it. So, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but from 2019 up to the point where I just got sober, I could not manage a bowl of Jell-O to save my life. I couldn't manage 5 minutes, and I couldn't manage 10 days, because after I went back out again after that 18 months, I was actually completely convinced that you guys had brainwashed me into believing that it gets worse. You hear it in the meetings all the time. It gets worse every time you go back out. And I almost was blaming that on you guys. I was like, you know what? They tell us it gets worse every single time you go back out. Is it because they're telling me it gets worse every single time I go back out? And you hear that long enough, I mean, I know, it's not the truth, though. I wanted to believe it, though, because I need some justification here. Somehow I made it back. I think I could go through the nitty gritty of how bad it was, but we all get to the seat, and it doesn't really matter how we got to the seat, because that's how I used to compare how much I valued your information that you were giving me at a table, is how bad it was for you, and I came to AA this time, and I realized that it's not really about what got us here. I think it's apparent that we all suffer from alcoholism. What I did not want to see coming back this time is, and this is what happened for me, right? I did not want to see what it was like for you now. I couldn't see it. I didn't comprehend it, because if you didn't have it as worse as I did, what you're going through now, can't be as bad as what I'm going through. And I would just, one of the first things that I get back when I get sober is my opinion and my judgment. And that's very true for me. And that's been true for all the times I've tried to get sober, because I didn't value anything anyone was saying in here. I just wanted to come back and get my stuff back and just move on. I'll go to meetings still, but I was missing the whole point, right? And I said no to so many things, so many times in AA, and I refused to do the things that people asked of me. I refused to do the things, I was too cool for a lot of the stuff for a long time. And I'll do this, but I won't do that. A bunch of reservations. And I see the result of that, and that was the in and out, the revolving door. Especially saying no to service. You know what, you should make a cup of coffee for someone, and you should make the coffee. I'm you know what, that's not going to keep me sober. And yeah, I know. Nor is opening meetings or putting chairs away and all this stuff that I'd say no to. I was just that's not what I need. And then we get introduced to this idea that you got to help other people, and I need help. And that was my, you know what I mean? How can I help? I need to help. I need to help myself. This just strong reliance on myself, right? It's just, it wouldn't get broken, unfortunately. And unfortunately slash fortunately, I come to a place in 2020 to which it had gotten so bad, to which my, solution no longer works. I was willing to pick up the phone, get help for the, God willing, the last time, go to treatment for the 17th time. At that point, I was living in Detroit, and I was living in a tent, and I could not handle, it wasn't even, what the crazy thing is, I feel a lot of us have really high tolerance for pain in here, and it wasn't even the lifestyle that I was living. That was tolerable for me. I can do that stuff and run it for a long time. What I could not manage is how I felt on the inside anymore. And thank God I got back to treatment, and I found myself back at Kyle's house again. And I remember I was on the phone, and I called someone, my friend Daryl, who sponsored me for my first 9 months this time around. And Daryl was in there when me and James Adamo were there back in the day. And he's always been thank God for people not closing the door on you in this place. Because that's something that it's an irrational fear that I've always had coming back. You think the door's closed every single time you go back out. And it's just never been my experience. It's what I see, though, right? I feel my tail is tucked between my legs every single time I walk back into this room after a relapse. It's quite difficult. especially with someone who deals with some toxic shame. And I don't know what happened this time. There was no burning bush moment or blinding light, and that's some people's stories. Like, some people just get it. They come in here and they get it, and like, God bless you, dude. But unfortunately, that's just not my story. And I don't know why some people get it and some people don't, or why it takes longer for other people. All I know is it took a tremendous amount of beating and a tremendous amount of my will being kicked out of me, I suppose. And when I picked up that phone, I called Daryl. I was like, I think I'm ready to do this. And he said, okay, let's go back to Kyle's house. And I was like, yeah, I'm not ready to do that, though. And I'll go anywhere else but that, right? Because that place was, so that shame rising up again. I can't go back, can't show my face again. Because by that time I'd been there already back 3 or 4 times. He's like, well, you're either just going to do it or you're not. And, before I'd made that phone call, though, I was in Eastwood Recovery Center in Southfield, and I was simply taking a shower. And this wasn't, like I said, I didn't have the burning bush moment, but I remember I was just taking a shower, and I'm like, I'm an alcoholic. And it was as simple as that. It wasn't nothing crazy. It was just the admission that, I'd always known, right? I think that's quite easy. I don't think it's quite easy to admit that second part of the first step, to which my life is unmanageable and I need some help in dealing with it. And I needed so much help. And I think that was a white flag surrender moment for me when I was just taking that shower. I was just obviously I can't drink like a normal person. But I also did not want to admit, though, that I could manage it when I get out of here on my own. And that's the problem that I've always had. And that moment of clarity in the shower, I'm going to have to attribute my sobriety today to that moment, because I was absolutely willing to buy in and to do anything. AA was definitely the last block on the house for me, because I tried everything. I tried to outsmart recovery. I've bought books that bash AA, right? AA is not the way, and things like that. I've done everything that you could possibly do so that I do not have to come here anymore. And I saw everyone's lives getting better on the outside. I was just there's got to be something to this, and let's just do this again. You know what I mean? But all bets are off. Just buy in completely. I don't care what you have to do, Dustin. And I called Daryl. I said, Daryl, I'm ready. Let's do this. I'll go to Kyle's house. I'll move back in, and I'll do anything that you tell me to. And for the first time in my life, I don't know if it's this for some of you, but when you get sober, you have these monster ideas, because I'm a really big idealist, and I think I have it all figured out. And that's what my problem was every single other time I tried to get sober. I'd have these grand plans of what's going to happen the first 30 days I get out of a treatment center, and the first 30 days I get sober. I'm going to do this, I'm going to tackle that, I'm going to say sorry to everyone. And I had just plenty of good ideas. And they would always fail, right? Because I place expectations on myself and other people that are too high, and when I don't meet them or they don't meet them, I get resentful. And then a big problem for me always getting sober too is when I'm 30 to 60 to 90 days sober, I don't really have shit. So it makes it a lot easier to give said shit up, because I'm just going to end up right back where I was anyway. So that was the revolving door for me too. But I remember I'd come back, and my friend Ian's sponsor got up, and he's every single day I hang my hat up on the first step, and I do my best to build myself a life that's worth living so that I don't have to throw that away anymore. And somehow that stuck with me too. I don't know if my ears were more open after I was able to just take that fresh breath of the air and just say that I'm an alcoholic and that I need help. My life's unmanageable before and after the drink. But I got to the point where I was willing to do anything. And for the first time in my entire life, I actually worked the steps. Because back in the program, 2016, I'd work the steps just to say I was working the steps. I kind of felt a part of something, but I had no idea what I was doing. And like I said before, I had no idea what I was up against. And I had no idea what I was saying no to. Half-ass 4 steps. And my amends process, I remember the time was just atrocious. And none of it meant really anything to me. Like, I had no clear understanding of what this is all about. And today, like, I get to kind of see a little bit of a bird's eye view of like how I viewed things versus now. And I'm not saying that I was doing things wrong the first time I was in the program. But if I'd make an honest admission, I probably wasn't doing things right either. And now I'm at the point where if I look back at the steps that I've taken over the last year and continuing into today, the steps have more value for me today than what they did beforehand. My friend just told me that, a couple months ago, he's like, well, you get sober and now God gives you a life that's bigger than yourself. And I never understood that either, because like life has always been about me and on all my problems and how do I fix it. And if you're in the way, like you just have to move out of the way so I can continue to do what I have to do for myself. And like that's been the pattern my entire life, is because it's just always been about me. So when he had told me that, I had realized that like I'd been missing again, right? The point of all of this, it's not so I can get my stuff back. I think being sober is great. You know, it is about being sober, but this whole idea of helping others is something that's very foreign to me, because like I've always worried about just helping myself, and I've had no real drive to help someone at all, ever, at all. In fact, I know this kind of sounds crazy, but like, I'm not saying I'm a psychopath or anything, but like I am not an empathetic person. And this time around, like after doing some step work, for the first time, I'm starting to feel things that I haven't really felt before. And I've also, felt a new drive for doing things that I've never felt before, such as service work. And like that's something that's new to me today. I don't think this would have happened though if like I didn't make that first step. But it also wouldn't have happened if I didn't make a decision in step 3 as well. My friend Ian also says that, you make that decision and then you go into the 4th step, and it's just like, well, let's see how willing you are now to do all this. And for the first time in my life, I completed a 4th step, to which I spent, I think, for a month straight, I dedicated 30 minutes to this thing. Because my first 4th step, I just wanted my sponsor at the time to hear all the injustices that were done with, like, against me, and have him agree with me and say, like, yeah, that's fucked up, man. And like, how dare they? And that's the format of my 4th step back in the day. It's just like I just needed someone to hear how wrong the world has done me. And I do a 4th step this time, and James Adamo like this. He likes philosophy. Socrates says, a life left unexamined is not a life worth living. And that's what the 4th step did for me. It allowed me to see the patterns of my life that I had refused to see or just couldn't see. I was able to write down enough, and it wasn't about just writing my entire life story. It was about writing just enough for me to see the patterns of how I'd lived my entire life and what things held me back. And for the first time, I got a clear understanding of how resentments have, like, poisoned me, and how I'd been under the spell of resentment my entire life. Every action that I was ever making was essentially built around the resentment that I've held my entire life against people, places, and things. And when I was able to get a clear understanding of why I was holding on to these things and what my part in it was, I was able to, for the first time, like, be free of this. And there's still a couple that I deal with from time to time, but like I was able to see that pattern. And when I went over it for the first time in the 5th step with my sponsor, and he did a great job, and it took a few hours for us to go through it, and it was just like, it wasn't, everyone says they feel better after a 4th step. Like, that's a lie for me. It's not my story. It's almost like, I don't know, you've been holding on to it for so long, and then you give it up, and you want to pick it back up kind of like those first couple weeks, and that's like kind of how it was for me. And then we get into 6 and 7, and this is where I start to actually see the patterns that I'd hold on to, like my behavioral patterns, and it's just like, well, this isn't going to be fixed overnight, and I understood that. And it took some time for me to, during that 4th step, to kind of see the patterns and to see my character defects and how that affects my day-to-day life. And so, like, that was interesting, right? Like, because I remember something would come up, and for a big one for me was, like, anger, right? And I'd see all these people and they don't get angry, but like I'm getting angry. And my sponsor at the time was just like, do you ever see anyone else get like angry? And I was like, yeah. He's like, well, how does it look? I was like, well, kind of disgusting. He's like, well, that's how you look like when you get angry. And I was like, okay. And that's kind of been the format of everything that I've gone through as far as like character defects and what I try to do to work on them. And, 6 and 7 is something that I still try to practice on a day-to-day basis. But it's something that I was able to finally start dealing with, though, because I didn't know what character defects were, and I refused to see them or refused to deal with them. One, because I never really took some time in a 4-step to see what they were. And also, like, I didn't care. But if there's something that's been very important for me this time around, the most important steps coming back was cleaning my side of the street up, also the 10-step. And I'll talk about those for a second. I think that alcoholics are extremely sensitive to the wrongs that are done against them, and we're extremely sensitive to the wrongs that we've done against other people. And there is like you might call me crazy, but I think there's a spiritual bond and a chain that's coupled with resentment and also with the wrongs that we've done against other people. And I think it's very important for someone like me to be able to loose those chains. And that's what we get to do in the 4th and 5th step, right? But when I was able to get to the 9th step and I started tackling a lot of these amends, because, most of my amends were like, it's going to be different this time. And I think I said that countless times to like my grandmother and my father. And I think I said it countless times to friends and loved ones. It's going to be different this time. Life is good now. Look at me. And I would do the same thing over and over and over again. My amends list was much longer this time around than it was coming back into AA again officially for the second time. But I know the first time that I'd ever done amends, it was more of an ego-driven amends process. It was just like, look at me, my life is really good now. Can't you see how good my life is? You should forgive me because I'm doing so good. And gosh, that was so bad. I remember some of the amends that I make, and I think that like a lot of you would probably puke and cringe if you were to see like some of the amends that I'd made back in the past. And today, like my dad, I talked to my sponsor about it. I was like, I don't really know how to make them. There's no amends process that I could ever think of for my grandmother and my father and for a few others. And for the first time, I do my best to doing a living amends to those types of things today. It's like, one, just don't participate in that type of behavior anymore. Stay sober, and that's probably the best thing that I can do for them. Like, I don't have to go and tell some sob story to my dad and my grandmother again to say how different it's going to be, because I've done that enough. I have no right to go there and say, I'm sorry, I've done enough damage. Just do the right thing for a while, and I think that would be good enough for them. And so far, I've kind of just tried to follow that path for the most part, because I don't really want to give an open or another speech to them saying like how different things are going to be, because things aren't really that much different. Like, I'm just sober today, and I'm just doing the next right thing. But that was only a short while ago that things were just absolutely atrocious. And for me to go to someone and ask for forgiveness right now, like, I still don't feel like that it's right. I know I have much work to do, and that's the thing. Like, that's something I also didn't want to believe in AA either. It's just like, well, how come we can't just do these 12 simple steps and just be done with this? And unfortunately, like, it's a lifelong process. Thank God just for today, but still, all those things are weighty when you first come in here, and you want to fix everything. And so today, for the most part, I know I've gone all over the place, but I think helping others is important. I know 11 and 12, I'll get there, but I used to just use the 10th step as just to, promptly admit when I'm wrong. And it's become much more than that for me. I've been able to, it's like, when am I living in resentment? When am I living in fear and in self-pity and all these other things? It's not about like just admitting like when I'm wrong about something, like, though that's become much easier. Beforehand, I would never admit anything, and I don't want to admit I was wrong. In fact, today I got a call from my boss saying that I fucked up something, and I wanted to be mad at him for blessing me with that information that I fucked up something. So that's, you know what I mean? Like, and then, today I get to text them back and say, hey, I fucked something up. I'm sorry. That was my fault. Beforehand, like, that was so damaging for a person like me to be for any type of criticism. And I think that's another thing that the program has helped me do today is admit that I messed up somewhere. I wanted to be mad. I threw my phone a little bit. I was like, you know what I mean? Like, it hurts to know that you're wrong. And that's very difficult still today. And I didn't throw my phone dramatically, but I almost threw your phone. He's recording. I get to do that today. I didn't used to be able to do those types of things. I hated admitting when I was wrong, and I hated criticism. In fact, like, one of the main things that brought me out that first time, or before 2019, was that I remember I messed up a job, and it was really bad, and I couldn't handle messing up or the criticism or the judgment of it. And that was a huge reason that sparked a flare of resentment, to which took me back out. And I never used to believe in that either. Like, why is resentment such a giant offender? It's because it does something so dramatic and so powerful to alcoholics and to someone like me that I can't get myself off of me in that time. And then, eventually, like, the greatest thing in the world seems is just to pick up a drink. And because yes, I like the effects that are produced by such substances, but I like not even the effects that it produces. I like what it's able to do for me as far as getting myself off me more than like the effect that it produces. Because like I can breathe after that. Like I feel good, confident, yada yada. We all know the feeling, but eventually that stops working. Eventually the solution that we've held on for so long doesn't work anymore, and then we come to the last place, the last house on the block, which is AA, and I'll kind of end with like 11 and 12. 11 was something that I didn't want to believe in either when I came back around. I had an old sponsor tell me, like, any step that starts with has a 1 in it, you can practice at any time, which is true. Thank you. I was going to do my best to do like a 15-minute open talk, but here we go. And when I got back this time, I tried to participate as much as possible in prayer meditation, because that's something I also said no to as well. I remember this first year around, the first 7 months were heavy with prayer meditation. I think a lot of us can relate, though. Like, once things start getting good, we can kind of back off those types of things. And at least that's what we think. What I've realized, though, is the time that I've taken away from prayer in the last couple months, and let this be, like, hopefully a reminder for everyone that life gets actually a little bit more chaotic when I stop praying and meditating and doing the things that you guys ask of us to do in here, these things that you suggest. I used to hate all the cliches, and it's cliche because they're true. And the prayer, the meditation, thanking God at the end of the night, asking Him to keep you sober in the morning, are the things that kept me grounded my first 6 months back here. Because of the fact that I've worked some steps and that I've stayed around long enough, like, someone came up to me and asked me to sponsor them. And I never would have thought that I would be here today doing an open talk, and I never thought I'd be sponsoring someone either. And for the first time ever, like I said before, like, I can relate with you guys. I never wanted to do that. I think that was the main thing that separated me from everyone, is that I could not relate with a single one of you. I was so focused on what got you here, but I wasn't focused on what it was like for you once you finally got to these seats. And when I was able to start relating with other people, I was able to start seeing that this is too much of a coincidence. I'm hearing too many of the same things for me to think this is coincidence anymore. Like, if you are saying this and you're saying this and you're saying this, of course it was bad before we got here, but you're dealing with the same thoughts processes that I am after we get to the seat. I couldn't see that before. And that's been made more clear for me now that I've been sponsoring someone, because when you take that time to listen to someone, and when you just get out of your own way a little bit, I've been able to finally see that, hey, the pain that you go through, like when the drink is down, is exactly the same pain that I go through. And I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. And we're here to find a solution that gets us out of that restless, irritable, and discontent state of mind. And we find that through God, and we find that through working the steps, and most importantly, we find that through the 12-step and helping others. And, I had a sponsor also tell me at one point that, hey, I didn't start getting this until I started helping other people. And it's been this will be actually the 10th week coming up this Tuesday that I've met with my sponsee. And I had a conversation with him. We didn't do such a formal meeting the last time that we had met 2 weeks ago. We went to Ramshorn, we sat down, I got some hot tea, got him some food, and I think we talked for like 2 hours. And I had realized in that moment, like, what I'd been missing out this whole time. And it's the fact that, like, I can just free myself for just a little bit and get out of my way just for a little bit, because I don't know if it's like this for you, but like when you're really focused on yourself, it's like the CNN ticker tape at the bottom that's just showing newsreels and it won't stop, and it's just all about you and like what you got to do and what's wrong and all this stuff. I've realized the only thing that slows that down is like when I'm talking to someone else about what they're going through. And don't laugh, Dustin. I'm just kidding. That's what my 12-step experience has been for me. Like, I got thrown on a couple 12-step calls over the past couple of years, and I've been on some before. But, I was just doing it because, like, it just makes you look good that you went and tried to help someone. What I've realized, though, is talking with my sponsee over the past 2 months is that it's that relatability factor. It's like I get to see, like, you know what? Like, you're going through the same thing that I'm going through. Thank God that AA is here to help us through that, because I don't know if you know what this is like either, but like it's very frightening to know or to not know that there's a solution like out here. And it's also frightening. It's even worse to know that there is a solution when you're still out there. And what's even worse, I think, is to be sober and to feel absolutely miserable and to be not doing a damn thing about it. And I think that's like where the 12 stuff comes in, because we can offer ourselves to someone so that they don't have to feel that way anymore. I've never wanted to do that before. I've never wanted to help another person not experience the feelings and the pain that I'd go through. That was not part of my agenda ever. So today I do my best. I still live in the sober living home. I've been there just a year, September 23rd. I've now been there 1 year. I still actively go to 5 to 6 meetings a week. My home group was Welcome Home, but I've switched home groups. I started going to a dignitarian meeting. I only go to all men's meetings now. And I do my best to not say no to AA anymore. So you gave me the 5-minute card, and that was enough for me. And I'm grateful to be here, and that's all I got. Thanks.
I got to give you a hug. That was your first open hug?
Yeah, very good. Can I sit now?
Yeah, you can sit.
All right, God bless.
Thank you.
You guys, let's thank Dustin again. That was outstanding.